Regardless,
It just
I heard most of what you guys talked about, and I like the counter arguments you came up with. But I thought maybe we could talk about why Daniel took this approach, right? Because he hasn't. I haven't seen him take this approach with anyone else. He's quite happy to talk about the different arguments for God's existence. Why do you think he did this?
I was thinking the same thing. He could have very easily had this argument in addition to other arguments. That's what a good debater would do. You marshal all your best arguments. That's what William Lane Craig does, doesn't he? He gets on stage and talks about the fine-tuning argument, cosmological argument. Not all the time, but he'll use all of those arguments in addition to this one, maybe. And that creates a strong case. He could have done a better job here by maybe doing the shotgun technique, by just spraying with so many arguments, and then this being one of series of many arguments. And then it would have been very difficult for Matt to go through them all, and something may have stuck, right? And he would have had a better, I think, wider audience of people who might have at least been persuaded. Maybe if there's somebody who's on the fence, they might think, this argument sticks, at least it works, right? I don't know why he didn't do that. So
It's quite funny if you go, because I wanted to see the comments on Daniel's channel. I'm always interested whenever he does debates, right? The last one where he was defending child marriage with the Christian guy, Mike Jones, I think his name was. I was more curious, when I got through that entire debate, about how people on Daniel's channel would comment on it, and I was quite intrigued about this one as well, right? I genuinely believed that some comments on his channel would have said, I'm usually a supporter of the way you debate, fan of your logic, but this one ain't it. You messed up this one, but no, it's still unrelenting support for the most part.
I'll tell you one thing. Amongst scientific-minded people, this is very obviously flawed in the sense that, but amongst philosophers, it does require a little bit more work just to kind of unravel, right? Because it has been the case in the history of philosophy. Some people have said that certain beliefs are just foundational axioms that don't require warrant. You get it? Things like induction, things like our sensory perceptions, things like other minds. Some people do in philosophy say that is like a bedrock belief that doesn't have any further justification. And amongst philosophers, these things are quite not, I wasn't well accepted, but can be moved. People are kind of moved by these sort of arguments a lot. So maybe he's in that mindset. And I imagine if there are philosophers in his audience, they could understand some degree of wisdom of this. Amongst people who've never heard of philosophy, this just sounds like insane stuff, right? Insanity. That's what it sounds like. It's like saying, I don't have any evidence, but I'm going to do this. And that's what it looks like. And if I had no training in philosophy, I would think the same thing. And I might even respond like Dillahunty, who I suspect underestimated. Yeah, but he probably thought the fact that Haqiqatjou is making this argument is a sign that he doesn't need to do anything anymore. Whereas everything that I've spoke for like 20-30 minutes talking about all these other stuff. I wouldn't have to do that if I didn't think there wasn't something behind it. But the point is, even though there's something behind it, I think it's still humiliating, because I don't think this is a product of genuine philosophical wisdom, but just creative thinking. Within philosophical circles, like within the philosophy of religion, Alvin Plantinga is one who makes these sort of arguments. It's genuinely creative and intelligent, and therefore you have to unravel it a little bit to attack it. But it's not like something that they generally found. It's just some philosophers are smart enough to come out with these gymnastics, and Haqiqatjou is doing that. Basically, he's borrowing that gymnastic technique taken from Alvin Plantinga, and just trying to say, look, we don't need evidence. It's like all these other beliefs. And
he's borrowing from them, but without having the same level of intellect, pretty much.
Yeah. He's going to probably say to Dylan, I'm not seeing the debate. He's probably going to say to Dylan, then show me evidence of this. Then show me evidence of other minds. Show me evidence of mathematics. Show me
exactly. This is what he does. This is what Daniel asks him. So what Matt says is that you have conceded your entire case because you said that there is no evidence. You're not going to provide any evidence. But then Haqiqatjou continuously just gets continuously he just gets back to Matt saying, okay, then prove the moral truths. Prove, why do you believe in logic? What is the evidence for that? What do you believe in this? So that is what his approach is.
Yeah, and
Uh,
within philosophical circles who believe in these things, they would be the people who are, this is called reformed epistemology. If Alvin Plantinga's arguments, properly basic beliefs, and the enthusiasts of it would love that. They would watch this and actually think Dillahunty couldn't explain it, and therefore, this is why I feel at least obligated to try and explain it or anticipate it. And I think people outside of the philosophy circle would just not see a problem with it, and that's why maybe Dillahunty is just cool and calm and he just wouldn't be bothered by it. But I do think, sorry, Cosmic, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say it's not as though Matt Dillahunty completely sits this part of the section out. He does try to defend why he holds certain intuitions and not others based on their continued ability to be reliable and whatnot. He doesn't contend all of his time. But an additional point to note, these sorts of topics or this line of conversation is interesting. But since Daniel chose the topics for the debate, he could have just added one more section that went over, what is good evidence, or why should we believe what we
Yes.
believe, or something like that.
Right.
As instead of 3 parts, you do 4 parts.
You
I have a small. Okay, so go.
No. Yes, you can. I mean, I just wanted to comment that I totally agree that this, approach that Daniel took, Matt actually seemed quite frustrated with his approach, because the first section, the first topic was evidence for God. So instead of discussing or providing evidence, what the approach that Daniel took was discussing the nature of evidences and what sort of evidences could be there, and that is what his approach was. So he sort of instead of discussing the topic, he discussed the nature of evidence and what sort of evidences could be there. And Matt actually said that you're not dealing with the topic, you're discussing something else, you're discussing the epistemology of evidence and all that. And Haqiqatjou was like, no, I mean, this is related to the topic and all that. But I totally agree with Cosmic that if Daniel wanted to discuss the epistemology of evidence and proof, then he should have added another topic before this, before this topic, which was the evidence for God.
I think isn't he giving the evidence by way of intuition, right? I mean, isn't he? It's a two-pronged approach, basically, right?
You know what? If we listen to
So
the
I mean, he
entire
doesn't need
portion
to
of his
provide any
statement,
evidence, right?
so
That's the evidence
so
for that.
the impression that we have gotten from the part of the debate that we already listened to, right? It's quite different when you listen to the entire part of his entire statement. You'll understand that his approach isn't that this is an evidence. He'll say that for us this is an evidence, but why should we accept, but you won't accept it, and you will not accept it because you have your own standard of evidences, and therefore, why should we accept your. So if you will listen to the entire statement, that's when you'll see the entire approach that Daniel is taking. So you'll get some what we're talking about, what I and Cosmic are talking about. You'll understand what we're talking about actually once you listen to the entire statement.
All right.
And as Cosmic said, that it wasn't that Matt was just sat through this portion of the debate or this topic, but he did make some mistakes. I think his arguments in some cases were not consistent, and Daniel Haqiqatjou did actually point those out, and I think I agree with them. I mean, he was trying. He did make some mistakes, I think. So yeah, despite the fact that he was trying to prove his point, but he made some mistakes at least.
Matt's not a philosopher after all. But I have one potential reason for why Daniel did what he did, right? Matt's a pretty good, reasonably good debater, right? And he's very good at explaining concepts, and he's debated and made videos on every argument for God, from design to contingency to others. I think if he's stuck on topic and chose one of those reasons, the primary reasons, design contingency or one of those. I believe the optics wouldn't have been as good as overwhelming Matt with philosophical questions, which is why I think he took this approach, because I think to him, optics do matter a lot in these sorts of debates. He knows the people he's appealing to are not very interested in the intellectual part of the debates. They're more interested in the body language of the opponent or stuff like that.
I think you were right, and I think this could be one of the reasons. And I mean, he wanted to surprise Matt with the kind of argument that he was going to come up with, right? So I think the Matt was not expecting this particular argument, and plus, I think I would say that one reason that I could think that I can think of why Daniel took this particular approach or argument is that he didn't want to present himself as someone who needed to prove something. And in this particular approach, the kind of advantage that he had was he was going to continuously put Matt on the back foot and require evidence from his side instead of providing evidence himself. I think that is where Daniel played a very tricky and I would say smart game, right? Don't you think, Mahdin?
Yeah. Connecting with what you just said, I think the reason this is kind of attractive, like you said, is puts him on the back foot, doesn't need to prove anything or prove a lot, and it makes his position look a bit more effortless in the sense that the very nature of this is an innate belief or an intrinsic belief is that it's self-evident. Everybody knows it, but connecting with what you said, the reason why they may gravitate to that direction is because they want to. I think there's a movement now within Islamic circles realizing the emphasis on empiricism, strong arguments, logic, and analysis, and the way religion comes. Religion doesn't really come through assessing logical arguments, analysis, and empiricism or science. And when you try to do that, there's good counter arguments against it, and they've probably been overwhelmed by that sort of attitude, that sort of attempts to put religion on a scientific or logical or analytical footing through arguments, trying to resemble the scientific method, like intelligent design and trying to rival the evolutionary theory and so on. They've kind of become exhausted by it. They want to go back to their roots, where most people enter into religious belief through spiritual feelings, right? Faith. And this comes closest to that, right? And that's possible. Again, this is a speculation on my part. That's probably one force of attraction, that they kind of want to reclaim that sort of high ground where actually, can we defend faith? Can we defend the idea that we don't need evidence, we don't need empirical evidence, we don't need laboratory evidence, we don't need arguments. This is just a natural belief. And simultaneously, that creates a strong position in the sense that this if it's a natural belief, then everything else requires evidence. This is just unquestionably true. And that simultaneously also aligns with the Quranic theme to some extent. I know you guys said a lot of people won't believe in the Quran and so on, but at the same time, the Quran mocks the unbelievers and says, can't you see the obvious, etc. And this is meant to be the obvious, the self-evident truth. And this is why they find this attractive of it being a self-evident truth. But yeah, I think that could be a reason why they're going down this route.
Right. Mahdin, just a moment. Give me 15 seconds. There is a message by Cliff Eberhard. Daniel lost the debate. He provided no evidence. He should try again next time and do better. Cliff, if you're still watching, if you want, please join. And if you want to, say anything, add to the topic, you're more than welcome. All right, Mahdin, please.
Yeah, no. I said what I want to say. We want to talk about the psychological motivations behind Muslims for adopting and spreading this argument. I think that is one of the reasons, because I think Muslims feel like that. They feel a sense of righteousness, over, wait a minute, this is so obvious, how could you question it? And that could be one reason as well. And that connects with what Khayalie is saying, that it means that, look, I don't need to put any effort in. You're the one who needs to disprove this. The burden of proof is on you to show why my belief is wrong, because this is just something that every human being have always believed, and that's his current day approach. I mean, if you notice some of Haqiqatjou's videos and so on, he did a video. I think I only watched a little bit of it of secularism or atheism, how atheism starts, and none of those dealt with evidence. It all talked about atheism is a product of moving away from your natural state. It's meant to be like a psychological disturbed state. It's because of schools. It's because of media. It's because of this and that and so on. None of it deals with evidence. I think he thinks, and he's not wrong necessarily in this aspect, that human beings are emotional beings, right? And the rise of atheism, secularism is mainly through emotional, social, and emotional habits, comfort, feelings, not sincere deep thinking. So he's probably just trying to make the case that, well, look, you the reason you believe in these things is because you don't come through it through evidence. You come through it through intuitions and feelings of modern day age. But I've got better intuitions. I've got a universal intuition or something, and today's feelings are just an aberration from it. And maybe that's what he's doing. I think he wants to go down that route because that's how he sees the world. He views the world like that, where people are not moved through evidence and arguments to adopt new beliefs. They're moved through feelings and intuitions.
I think I'll add something which probably you guys may have already talked about. I may be repeating this point. One more reason that, or probably if you have already talked about it, is that he wanted to keep his camp happy, right? And what is his camp? Is most of the Muslim believers, pretty much, right? And once he brings this argument, they don't need any other reason to, believe, pretty much. All is, even if somehow Matt is going to come up with some arguments against it, there's pretty strong evidence for everybody who follows him to just keep believing. Any other argument instead of this could have just backfired, and then that camp probably wouldn't have been as happy as it is now, right now.
Maybe.
So I think it was a kind of a safe approach from him. Maybe whether it was deliberate on his part, thinking through all those things or not, who knows. But it probably seems to be working for him, maybe.
Yeah.
I think so.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was agreeing with Philo, and of course I agree with you. What you just said was totally. I totally agree with you that this is what I think that is why he took this approach. And you are right that this is how they are justifying their their original position, in a way that faith. We have faith, and we don't need evidence for faith, because you believe in things which requires faith. So and we will base our faith on our intuitions. That's all. We don't need any further evidence for that.
One thing, have you guys noticed this? I have been noticing this trend for past 1.5 year or so, probably more recently than the timeline that I'm giving, is that more and more apologists are abiding to this philosophy that, okay, we have our faith, and now we're going to take it as a as an properly basic belief, pretty much, right? Gone are the days when they used to bring Mahdin, you remember those days when we used to go and then debate with Hamza and all those gang about Quranic science and all those things. They have just shoved away all those things, right? Because all those were problematic, right? Anybody could point a finger at them, and then they had to go through all those troubles of refuting
basically anything that is examinable and prone to be false, they've kind of moved it away from that, right? Even the scientific miracle argument, he changed it in such a way it can't be falsified anymore, right?
Sorry, go ahead, Mahdin.
No, that's all I want to say. You carry on.
Right. No. I was telling. I think we have talked about this quite a lot. Khayalie is probably bored already to death, and maybe Cosmic has heard about this as well. right? And then this was the trend pretty much in 2011, 2012, when Mahdin, myself, and a couple of other guys, we used to go to Hamza's Facebook page. At the time, this YouTube debate arena didn't exist, right? And all of a sudden, after this this arrival of new ex-Muslims, pretty much, and specifically the ex-Muslims of the subcontinent, they have created a kind of a tsunami within the subcontinent, right? And these guys are kind of finding it tough to deal with that this problem, right? Because they're pointing at too many problems within the scripture, within the logical problems and all. I mean, you can't hide behind those things now, right? Now what you have to do, and that's why they are, it seems to me, they are moving behind this curtain of properly basic belief, pretty much, right? Just
But
can't refute it.
I don't think it's a tenable position. Like Matt may not have been the best person to counter this, but the thing is, the fundamental intuitions that they are challenging, the laws of logic, for example, they also need them to prove that Islam is true. So this Matt may not be the best person to defend this, but the thing is, they also have to defend the same, more or less the same assumptions that he's accusing Matt of not being able to justify. All of those underpin selecting the right religion and believing in it. So I think it's an approach that won't work for very long. They just have to encounter one guy that's philosophically literate, and I think that it's just they're going to use less and less of this. And in fact, just one more thing I have to add. I think in recent years, what I've seen is that these guys do a fairly good job of selecting opponents. So, for example, the skydive Phil guy, you guys might know about. He's a person. I think he graduated from UCL in something to do with physics or some field adjacent to physics. And when he wanted to debate with Sabur on the Kalam cosmological argument, Sabur refused. And then they had that whole debate regarding human gym common ancestry and whatnot, which is not Phil's field. Similar to this, our own Kesser, right? He challenges people on debates regarding evolution, but he never challenges someone who is from the field. He challenges popular atheists. He challenges science educators. He challenges other people like that, but he never challenges someone who's an expert in the field. And this shows, so he's Matt, who is an expert more on the discussing the different arguments for God. He's challenging him philosophically. If this was maybe a philosopher, he would have been maybe talking more about evolution or something that's not in their forte. I think I've seen this over the last couple of years.
Right, I think you're right. Too many problems with these guys, and as you rightly said, these guys select the opponent pretty judiciously, if I may say, or shrewdly, or whatever you may want to call. And also, their topics are, really well selected as well, and that's how they get the grandstand, pretty much. That's been their kind of strategy for a long time, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, what do you think? Shall we carry on? Anybody has anything more to add? I think what I was expecting was Cliff Abrahart would join because it seems that he has never been to our stream. So would have been, would have loved to talk to him for a bit, maybe 5-10 minutes or so. But he's not here anymore. So do you think we should end the stream? Probably seems like a good time to end the stream, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. I'll just say everything that I said already also applies to mathematics. It also applies to certain aesthetic features, or it also applies to other analytical truths and so on. I mean, you can analytically derive. If Haqiqatjou's argument is that you don't need an argument for any of these things, well, philosophers think mathematics can be at least either justified through synthetic thinking, synthetic truths, or analytical truths. Mathematics might just simply be a language that is derived from the world, right? 2 objects exist, therefore the number 2 is just a description of the 2 objects. 10 objects exist, 10 bananas exist, the number 10 is just a description of the objects. We don't see a similar thing for God. So mathematics is merely a language that we impose on the world and derived and in describing the world, and then derive it into a kind of formulaic a formula so that we can turn it into this kind of algorithm and then play around with it, and it helps us navigate the world. That might just be it. And if that's the case, that's one explanation behind mathematics. I don't know if it's 100% true or not. It sounds plausible. And that's, that might, there's different explanations here for math that could be plausible, that doesn't exist for the case for God. There's nothing in reality where you can do the same sort of thing for God. If you can do it, it'll be an argument, right? If you can show, God can exist in this way as well, then now you're talking about an argument. Now you're talking about reasoning. Everything that I just did there is reasoning, right? I made an observation of the world, and that's how I came with mathematics. And then the mathematical language can operate independently, and we can play weird games with it. That might not even correspond to a real world, but it can exist in the domain of mathematics. That could be an explanation behind math and why mathematics is justified to some extent, at least when we're talking about the world, because it corresponds to the world. It's a description of the world. And if that's the case, then I've given arguments to justify mathematics, reasoning to justify mathematics. Where's the reasoning and arguments for God? And if you do give reasoning and arguments for God, then you've moved away from your position of intuition. It's not intuition that gives me math. So you must also have, Haqiqatjou must also have arguments to show why God is similar to math. And the same for aesthetic stuff. I mean, then there's also theories about like morality, which you can just hold the position that morality isn't true. Nihilism. Lots of 20th century philosophers thought that. The logical positivists thought that. It isn't, it's just emotions in our mind, attitudes, emotivism, right? You can be skeptical. You might not be a moral realist. You might be a moral nihilist, right? Precisely because you might not be able to justify morality either through analytical thinking or through science and synthetic thinking. And if that's the case, then morality doesn't exist. Now, my personal view, I've shifted many times over time. My personal view that I think morality can be an analytical truth. But see, I still have to justify it. I'm still having to justify it within analytical thinking or science synthetic thinking. And I'm starting to think that it might be like an analytical truth, like 1 + 1 = 2. It might just be that morality could be like, it starts from a definition, like of compassion, and to be a compassionate person, you can't do X, Y, Z. There'll be a contradiction, something like that. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but at least I'm trying. I'm not like these guys, who just want to say it's intuition. Because if I had to admit that I can't have any evidence either through analytical thinking or synthetic thinking, then I have to admit that moral nihilism is the real position. I will never just say it's because of intuition, because that's not what philosophers have been doing. What's the point of the entirety of philosophy for such a long time? What was the point of it if you can just justify everything through intuition? That the external world exists. Descartes, why did he write his paper on meditations and so on? He didn't have to do any of that. Questioning the existence of the external world, questioning the existence of himself, which he didn't. He ultimately said it ultimately proved, I would imagine, and not the self in the sense that he exists, in the sense that his name is Descartes, but some sort of self must exist. And he did this through what? Through the law of contradiction, analytical thinking, but still some evidence. You can't do the same thing for God. The existence of the external world, however intuitive it might seem, at the very minimum is experienced by everybody as well. You don't experience God in the same way, right? If anything, it requires certain beliefs, certain suppositions, certain interpretations, certain understandings before you can understand it. But whatever the case, the existence of the external world, you don't need to have a conclusive answer on it anyway. You can be an agnostic about that, right? That's another position you can hold. A lot of philosophers think that they can't prove the external world, they can't disprove it either, and they hold an agnostic position, right? But the difference between that and our God belief is that the external world is experienced by every single person as soon as they're born. And we don't see the same for God. Every single person isn't communicating or interacting with a divine being as soon as they're born, or something like that. There's no evidence of that. So so there's distinctions to be made about every other faculty that Haqiqatjou. So I'm basically trying to anticipate the things that he may say to Dillahunty. We've not seen it, but I'm sure he's going to force him to explain. Okay, how do you prove this? How do you prove the problem of other minds? How do you demonstrate the existence of other minds? Isn't that just an intuitive, natural belief? You can't scientifically show that every other human being has a consciousness. Well, we do have good evidence for that, though, right? We've got inductive evidence of brains, and we've got inductive evidence of evolution, of a shared DNA lineage, descendants, and so on. And it's very likely that just like our brains have this connection between our neurological states and our conscious experience, it's very likely the rest of humans have that as well, right? And you can make a scientific theory, you can make certain predictions that you would expect. For example, if somebody was not a philosophical zombie, for example, you would do certain things. You might experience pain, you might experience suffering and trauma, and so on. And the thesis that everyone apart from you, everyone else is a philosophical zombie is more unlikely, and you can think of this as like a Bayesian argument. It's less likely than the idea that the reason why these experiences, every other human is displaying these similar experiences, is because we have a shared evolutionary lineage, right? That's more likely. So whilst it might be the case that everyone else is a philosophical zombie, it's the least plausible explanation than just assuming, or inferring, I should say, not assuming, inferring that the best explanation is that just like me, everybody else has conscious minds. Everybody else has sentience, and they have a self, and so on. Now, however weak or strong that sounds, at least it's distinguishable from, this is just my intuitions. I'm giving an explanation, there's evidence for it, and so on. But Haqiqatjou doesn't have the same sort of resources to make that sort of argument for God, right? I can demonstrate the existence of other minds in the way I have done there, but the Haqiqatjou can't do that for a belief in God, or God, yeah.